Good morning. How's y'all doing today? What a much better day today, right? Beautiful outside. Glad you're here. Next Sunday is Mother's Day. Awesome. Excited about that. Special message in our series, The Hurt and the Healer. We're going to be talking next Sunday about healing for hurting parents. Kids can hurt parents. Sometimes decisions that they make brings a lot of pain in the life of kids. So we'll be talking about that in our series next Sunday, Help for Hurting Parents. I mentioned this last week, and some people came to me and said, we thought you were joking. I'm not joking. June 4th, 30th anniversary of Eastside. We're going to be celebrating. Isn't that awesome? 30 years. In the front here, we have some new chairs. We're actually going to be taking up a special anniversary offering to buy more chairs. They cost $50 a chair. I'm just asking everybody to buy a chair. You can't take it home. You can't carve your name in it so that if somebody's in your chair, you can say, get out of my chair. Not a very friendly thing to do at church. But if you could help us with that. And we'll put as many of these new chairs and some of that, like where will we put them? Up front. They will be up front. So the people who sit up front will get the new chairs. Doesn't that sound fair? All righty then. How many of you, when you got your notes, you were ready to panic? Have you looked at the notes? I wonder how many people got notes and went home. That was my concern. They got the notes and they're like, I'm out of here. There's no way he's going to get through that. Well, I'm just telling you, never done this much before. We've got through it. Listen, last service, got out early. Not going to happen this time because I'm tired. But last service, we got out early. We got through all this material. What it is, if you remember, this is part 3. We're just, healing for hurting marriages. And we're going through, I'm just sharing information I discovered in a book, 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work by Dr. John Gottman. There's just so much material in it. I'm finishing up today. I wanted to make sure we got the material out to you. The reason we chose this book is because this book is not an opinion book about marriage, where some therapist writes their opinions about what works. 700 couples in a love lab were observed by Dr. Gottman and his staff, and this is scientific research, and here's the observations and discoveries that they made that I'm sharing with you. I found them fascinating. Now, some say, Pastor Fred, I don't come to church to hear somebody talk about a book that some potentially non-Christian even wrote. And I told you this, tell you again, all truth is God's truth, no matter who discovers it. I mean, scientists are discovering truths in the universe. They didn't create them. They're discovering what God already put in place, all right? I don't care who discovers them. And this is an individual who I think has discovered some truths about relationships that can help us. And also, I taught you last week that when we're receiving information, as followers of Jesus, when we receive information, whether it's movies or music or books or arts or poetry or whatever it is, you have the opportunity to either reject it. You can look at it and say, I reject this, I receive it, or in some cases, we can redeem it and use it in order to promote Christ. And that's what we're doing with this material. We're receiving much of it, we're redeeming some of it, and so we are using it because I believe if we could get these 7 principles down, it's a way for Christ to express his life through us. That's what we want to do, right? We want Christ to express his life through us as husband, as wife, in friendships and relationships, however it is, all right? So, are you ready to go? I hope so, because there's a lot of writing that's going to be done. And we are going to be taking a test at the end of the service, so you better write some stuff down. I put the 4 previous principles in this list. So I want to review them with you. The first 4 we went over last week. I wanted you to have them all together in one piece of paper that you can hang on to and discuss and talk about and refer to in the future. Number 1, 7 principles for making marriage work. The first one was to embrace your love maps. That's the idea of being familiar with each other's world, becoming friends. You remember me telling you last week, make cognitive room in your mind for your mate. I mean, know what they value, know their fears, know their struggles, what they like, what they don't like. And I also told you last week that you will always be uploading this information. You're always going to be uploading it because everything's changing. Couples change, relationships change. There's upheavals and there's just regular changes that happens. And by the way, if you're in here and you say, I've been married 30, 40 years, I don't have to listen anymore, I've got it down, wrong. This is a lifelong process. We're always updating information. As well as this, I gave out a list of questions last week. We may have run out, I think, at the end of the third service last week. There's plenty of papers at the doors as you go out. How many of you in the room, I want to know, come on, help me out. How many of you got some of those questions last week? Did you? How many of you went over some of them? How many of you started a big fight? Anybody? I don't want to know that. No, I mean, get the questions. They're not going to cause a big fight. They're actually going to let you get to know each other better. It's kind of a tool to use. So enhance the love maps. Number 2, nurture your fondness and admiration. The idea that your mate is worthy of honor and respect. You treat them as if they're valuable. By the way, you admire what you think is valuable. Do you understand that? If you think your boat's valuable, you admire it. If you think your motorcycle is valuable, you admire it. Your car, your possessions, same with your spouse. If you think they are valuable, you will admire them. Build that. You say, how do you build that? By thinking positive. Think about the pot. Don't focus on just the negative. If you focus on the negative, you're going to nurture bitterness and resentment and anger and frustration and disappointment and depression. But instead, you can nurture fondness and admiration. I told you how you can check it. Remember? You can check it by this. How do you talk to one another? Does your speech to one another convey honor and respect? Sometimes we talk to total strangers with a lot more respect than we do a spouse. Familiarity breeds what? Contempt. Contempt's the killer. Contempt is the killer in a marriage. Contempt is when the cynicism and sarcasm and name-calling and blaming and eye-rolling, you convey that. That is a killer in a relationship. Nurture and admiration is the antidote to contempt. When you build nurture and admiration, it's the antidote to the killer of contempt. Number 3, we talked about turning toward each other instead of away. That simply means that little things that you do, that you acknowledge the value of a person by, you see little things that you know pleases or benefits them or helps them, and you do that. You turn toward it, you don't turn away. And whenever your spouse seeks your affection or your approval or your support, you don't turn away, you turn toward them. That's what it means to turn toward one another. And by the way, it is the key to romance. Real life romance is fueled by staying connected, not the Hollywood version. I'm talking about real life romance happens when couples turn toward each other instead of away. And then number 4, last week we talked about let your partner influence you. Value their opinion. Happy, stable marriages share decision making. However you do it, however you arrive at it, it's probably different in every home in some way, but you share decision making. And I said last week, according to the research, Dr. Gottman said men have more trouble with this issue, typically, generally speaking, than women. Men typically say, I just kind of want my way or the highway kind of stuff. All right, now, let's move on. This is all new stuff right now, okay? Let's look at new material for today, and we're going to be talking about 2 kinds of marital conflict. We're going to shift gears right now, and we're going to start talking about conflict, 2 kinds of marital conflict, because you want your marriage to be a refuge from the storm, not a storm. All right? You want your marriage to be a refuge from the storm. You don't want to go into the storm. Now, this is not a time to raise your hand. This is not a time to raise your hand. But I wonder how many of you right now, your marriage, you would describe it more as a refuge from the storm, or would you describe your marriage more as a storm? One of the two. All right? So we want it to be a refuge from the storm. When it comes to conflict, listen to this. You can do all the four things I talked about. You can embrace your love map and nurture admiration and affection, and you can, turn toward one another and share decision making. You can do all those things, and you will still have conflict. Isn't that good news? You can do all the four things I mentioned perfectly right, and you still can have conflict, because when two people get married, you're joining two opinions, two personalities, two backgrounds, two sets of values. And let me just say it this way, real simple. Man and woman. Do I need to say anything else? You take a man and a woman together, and that's always friction and conflict. All right? So it's going to happen, conflict. Some couples, though, are stuck in conflict. They're stuck. Every time they talk, it seems like it's a conflict. Have you ever been stuck in the mud in your car, and the wheels are spinning, and you're making no progress? You just accelerate the gas and your wheels spin. Have you ever got out and tried to push your car out of the mud? Have you ever know what happens when you do that? Throws mud out all over you. That describes a lot of people's marriages. They're stuck in the mud, and every time they try to get out, they just get dirty, messy. And that's what appears to happen for many couples who are stuck. So we're going to talk about this on how to get a little bit, to get unstuck. Now, here's something also. A lot of couples think their problems are totally unique. Nobody else has anything like their problem. Because if you only knew my husband, if you only knew my wife, totally unique set of circumstances. Nobody's ever faced the problems that I have faced. Well, typically that's not true. All problems fall into one of two categories. That simple. All the problems we face fall into one of two categories. Knowing how to identify them and deal with them helps us develop coping strategies for them. So let's write them down. Number one, first type of problem is what Dr. Gottman called perpetual problems. 69% of all problems are perpetual problems. He did a 4-year follow-up on many of these couples that he had had in his love lab and had observed, and he discovered that they were still arguing about the same exact things. Perpetual problems. Here's the difference. Stable couples have learned how to deal with perpetual problems. They don't allow them to overwhelm them. Stable couples know how to deal with them. Here's one way they know how to deal with them. These couples have just understood that problems are a part of any relationship. They just know going into it, problems are a part of any relation, just like they know physical ailments are a part of any relationship. A person's going to get physical ailments as you stay together long enough. Can you imagine somebody coming to church and she walks in and I say, well, sister so-and-so, good to see you. Where's your husband? Oh, I left him. I divorced him. Why? He's got a bad back. We got married, he didn't have a bad back. I'm not staying with any man with a bad back. Or the guy walks in, some guy walks in, you go, brother, so good to see you. Where is sister so and where's your wife? Oh, I left her, divorced. She's got a bad knee. She's having knee replacement surgery, and I didn't marry some woman with a bad knee, and I left her. How many of us would look at that and go, that's ridiculous? You don't leave somebody because there's a physical problem. But sometimes we cannot accept the, emotional problems that come into a relationship. One way stable couples are able to overcome this, they know to expect problems. I love this quote from a gentleman by the name of Dan Wiley. He says this: When choosing a long-term partner, you will inevitably be choosing a particular set of unsolvable problems that you'll be grappling with for the next 10, 20, or 50 years. That's exciting, isn't it? Doesn't that just make you want to run out and get married? I'm telling you right now, I'm ditching my previous premarital material, and I'm doing this. This is the first thing every couple who gets married. This is the first thing they're going to see and read. Now, I'm going to say, now, do you still want to do this? Because there's a lot of truth in that. Stable couples know how to deal with perpetual problems. Unstable relationships, these problems kill the relationship. You see, because it leads to, another way to call perpetual problems, it leads to gridlock. Gridlock. You ever heard of gridlock? Can I give you an illustration of gridlock? Washington, D.C. Now, typically, I encourage Eastside for everybody to check your politics at the door and let's come in here and worship Jesus. All right? But I'm going to mention Washington, D.C. Not any particular party, both. Because what you have there is you have gridlock. Here's what happens when gridlock takes place over a period of time. The four horsemen arrive. Criticism, contempt, which is a relationship killer. Whenever you start treating somebody with sarcasm and cynicism and name-calling and blaming and eye-rolling, and you're just cynical, you're at the verge of a destroyed relationship. Stonewalling comes into play. Defensiveness comes into play. That's what you have in Washington, D.C. You have gridlock. Nothing gets done. Don't want that in your marriage. You don't want that in your marriage. And so we have to learn to deal with perpetual problems. Now, in your notes, I give you a list, and I just call them signs of gridlock. I'm just going to mention these so you got to write fast. Okay? Don't really have time to develop them very much. Let's just mention them. These are signs for you to know if there's some gridlock in your relationship. Number one, the conflict makes you feel rejected by your partner. You feel rejected by your partner. Next one, you keep talking about it but make no headway. Keep talking about it, but you make no headway. Next one, unwilling to budge. I shall not be moved. Unwilling to budge. Next one, the discussion leaves you feeling more frustrated and hurt. By the way, let me just tell you this. When you and I stay away, we do our best to stay away from frustration and hurt. We don't want to walk into this. We don't like it. If this is always happening every time you talk as a couple, you eventually will disengage. You'll emotionally disengage. You're not going to talk because you don't want to put up with frustration and hurt all the time. The next one, the conversations about the problem are devoid of any humor or affection. There's no humor or affection. Next one, you begin to vilify each other. You begin to vilify each other. And then, as I just mentioned, eventually, and this is when it's dangerous, eventually you disengage. Remember, if friendship is the key, this is the antidote. Disengaging from one another is dangerous. This is when things are getting dangerous. And this is what happens when there's consistent, continual gridlock. So, hopefully we can help you in a moment with some things that will help you through the gridlock. So, perpetual problems was the first type of marital conflict. Number two, second type of marital conflict is solvable problems. All right? Solvable problems. These may sound simple. You're like, this is really easy. Solvable problems. We'll just solve them. The problem is, just because it's a solvable problem doesn't mean it gets resolved. It doesn't mean it gets resolved. Oftentimes, by the way, solvable problems can cause a great deal of pain. They can cause a great deal of pain. Here's the main difference between the two, and this is not in your notes, okay? Here's the main difference between a solvable problem and a perpetual problem. A solvable problem deals with a situation, a particular situation, whereas a perpetual problem, there's some underlying issue, all right? more than just the situation. Let me give you an example from the book, all right? Two couples are going to be fighting about the husband driving too fast. Sound familiar for anybody? Husband is driving too fast. Couple A, she begins to complain. He's driving too fast. She doesn't feel safe. He argues back that it's fine, he's got it under control, but here's what's underneath him. He doesn't feel like she trusts him. I'll take care of you. When you attack me on driving, underneath, he feels like she doesn't trust him, that he's not a protector and he can take care of her. He doesn't need her telling him how to drive in order to take care. So he feels like she doesn't trust him. The underlying issue is trust, although it may never come up. They just fight about driving. Now, the reason she says slow down, she doesn't feel safe. And she gets really upset when she says, would you please slow down? And he totally ignores it. Because see, she feels rejected when that happens. She doesn't feel accepted when that happens. She grew up feeling rejected when that happened in her life. And so that's just triggering all kinds of stuff in her. And so underlying issue for her is the issue of rejection and security. And it's a big deal to her. But it never comes out. It's just fighting over the driving. And by the way, they're going to be arguing about it for the next 10, 20 to 40 years because they're not dealing with the issue. It's a perpetual problem. Do you understand it? Couple B, they work at the same area. They ride to work together. He's driving to work. She's going, would you please slow down? You drive too fast. And he said, well, that's because you get to the car late. That's why I have to drive like this to get us on time, because you're not out here on time. And she said, well, you want to know why I'm late? Because I'm picking up the dishes you left behind from breakfast. And so they're arguing, and there's no underlying issue. It's just, you're late, I have to go fast. Well, you don't clean up after yourself. And so, solvable problem, yeah, here's one. Why don't you get up 15 minutes earlier? And why don't Bubba pick up some plates when he's done with it and put them in the dishwasher? And now all of a sudden they're riding to work and everything's good, but there's no underlying issue. Do you see the difference between the two? One, they're fighting over the same kind of thing, but there's an underlying issue. And it remains a perpetual problem. Now, I put this in here. The key to all conflict resolution. All right? The key to all conflict resolution. Communicating acceptance of your partner's personality. Oh, by the way, whenever something's called the key, you might want to write it down. This is the key. Here's what it's basically saying. Human nature makes it virtually impossible to accept advice from somebody that you don't think understands you. You feel like they don't accept you. You feel like they're judging you. You want to know what happens when you feel judged, rejected, unaccepted? You want to know what happens when you're receiving information from somebody you feel that way? You just dig your heels in. You don't even pay attention. You're just digging your heels in going, I'm not going to listen to that because of the way the person feels about me. Does this make sense? But if you can communicate acceptance and you can communicate understanding, the person is much more likely to hear. By the way, when I think of this, I think Jesus Christ was the perfect model of this. He communicated with so many people, and so many people listened to him. You want to know why? Because he communicated acceptance of them. The Pharisees, they didn't have much of a crowd with the common man. One of the main reasons, they didn't accept him. Jesus did. Jesus did. So one of the key to conflict resolution is acceptance. No matter if the problem's big, no matter if the problem is small. All right. So, two kinds of conflict, perpetual, solvable. Now let's jump back in and let's finish up real quickly the 5 principle. Are we ready for number 5? We did 4. Here's number 5. Number 5 in 7 principles making your marriage work. Solve your solvable problems. That's kind of unique, isn't it? Solve your solvable problems. Now, here's what's unique. How many of you in the room have either read a book, attended a seminar, or maybe went to a conference or even a session where some counselor told you there's a certain way to communicate with each other? And they gave you certain tools, like you have to set knee to knee and look eye to eye and put yourself in their shoes and repeat back what they say to you. One time, Laura and I listened to Gary Smalley, he was great. He's passed away now, but he was an incredible marriage. How many of you heard of Gary Smalley? Some great stuff, great books. And he talked about the McDonald's drive-in conflict resolution communication thing, where you say something and they repeat it back. We even took a McDonald's fries, and you had to hand it, and if you were not holding the McDonald's fry box, you couldn't talk. So when I got the McDonald's fry box, it's a 3-hour, hey, baby, you're not getting this back until I'm done. And couples, listen, there were all these kind of things to help, and here's what Dr. Gottman said. Couples can't do those things. You can't put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Matter of fact, he went on to make this observation, which I found pretty fascinating. He said, he observed many couples who broke all of those rules. They broke all of those communication rules and got along great. And they resolved their issues. And they broke all of those rules. And what he said is that he observed 5 things, and I put it in your notes. By the way, how many of you know we're on the back of the notes already? I mean, we're already on the back, so relax. You're going to get through all this on time. All right? 5 steps for solving your solvable problems. All right? Here it is. Number 1, he said you need to soften your startup. Soften your startup. This was, I think, what I'm about to share with you could help you so much. Upon observation, he said this. Communication, arguments, discussions, they end the same way they start. Did you catch that? Most communication or conflict issues or whatever you're doing, that discussion is going to end the same way that it started. That's why Dr. Gottman said, with 96% accuracy, he can tell how a discussion is going to end by the first 3 minutes, because they end how they start. So, if you're in a communication with your spouse and right off the bat you go for the jugular, you might get a lot of blood, but you're not going to solve this issue. You are not going to solve the issue. Matter of fact, I also read this in the research. Most couples do not divorce over a big, devastating fight. It's usually over constant skirmishes that start difficult and end difficult. Constant skirmishes that don't come to a resolution. Now, you ready for this? Ladies, last week, if you were here last week, how many of you ladies remember that on number 4, when I said let your partner influence you, I busted the chops of the dudes? Well, you may not remember it, but I did, and said that men struggle with that, according to Dr. Gottman, more than women. Well, ladies, I'm going to turn the table. When it comes to softening your startup, Dr. Gottman says, generally speaking, ladies do this more often than men. Because men tend to avoid issues. Ladies are more often the one to bring up the issues, and if they bring up going for the, ladies, if you started up going for the jugular, and you say, yeah, that's right, those men just buries his head in the sand, denies everything, doesn't want to talk about anything. One thing to remember is that your husband's body, physiologically, he is more reactive to emotional stress. So what does that mean? That means that the man, generally speaking, more often than not, his heart rate's going to go up quicker. His blood pressure is going to go up quicker. He's more tend to be sweating and all uptight than you are. That means he can much easier be flooded emotionally. That means if your man feels like that, he's usually going to do one of two things. Unless he knows some skills in resolution, he's going to either fight or flight. He's either going to want to run or he's just going to start fighting, and he might say all kinds of things. And it's not going to help resolve the issue. Generally speaking, it is ladies more than men, although men do it as well. Now, in your notes, real quick, several things. We're just going to fill them out real fast. How to start soft. You go, well, okay, I kind of like going for the juggler, Pastor Fred. So can you give me another way of doing it? Okay, here you go. How can I start soft? Number one, first thing there in your notes, complain, don't blame. Complain, don't blame, even though what you may be saying is true, it's not productive. Next one, make statements that start with I instead of you. This is pretty typical stuff here. You know, I feel versus you always. You start with you always, and the defense will come out. So the idea is to focus on feeling versus accusing. Next one, describe what is happening. Don't evaluate. Describe what is happening. Don't evaluate. Just describe. Don't evaluate or judge. Next one, be clear. You go, what do you mean be clear? Here's an example he put in the book. And by the way, just understand, your mate is not a mind reader. In one case, he saw a wife that said something like this. Could you take care of the baby for once? Could you just take care of the baby for once? Versus, would you please change little Elmer's diaper? Hey, Elmer's a good name to choose, by the way, if you're looking for a man's name. Could you change little Elmer's diaper? Now, that clearly says this is what I need you to do instead of taking a shot because the guy might be going, what does that mean? Take care of the baby for one. What are you talking about? I don't know. So be clear. Next one, write this down. Be polite. Please, I would appreciate if, thank you. Be polite. Next one, be appreciative instead of attacking. For instance, instead of saying, you never have any time for me, you might say, you know what? I really appreciated it when we watched that movie together 22 years ago. I'd kind of like to do that again sometime. I kind of enjoyed that. All right, be appreciative. Try that instead of attacking. And the next one, don't store things up. Don't just keep storing stuff up because when it blows, oh, she blows. It's going to blow. That's a biblical principle. Ephesians, Paul said this, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down, say it with me, while you are still angry. You want to know what he's saying there in that verse? Don't store things up. That's all he's saying. Don't store things up. All right. So we're talking about steps for solving solvable problems. Soften your startup. Number 2, write this down. Here's the second thing you can do to solve solvable problems. Learn to make and receive repair attempts. Learn to make and receive repair attempts. Remember I told you in the first message there was a warning sign that things were not going well. That is when couples they don't know how to repair. Things are going off and they don't know how to repair. How many of you in here have taught one of your teenagers or somebody else's teenager how to drive? Have you ever done that? You've taught somebody how to drive. I think Laura did more than I did because I'm not super patient in a vehicle, as you probably can tell by my illustrations. Yet I did some of it. I do remember this. Start the car, before you do anything, I want them to know one piece of equipment in the car more than anything else. And it's not the gas pedal. It's sitting right next to the gas pedal. It's called the brake. Touch the brake. Touch it again. Touch it again and again. Do it 25 times. I want you to get the feel of the brake. And then when we start to drive, I'm going to tell you to stop. Whenever I tell you to stop or brake, you say you do it, whether you see anything or not, whether you know anything's around or not. If I say brake, brake. And just to try him, I let him go for a few seconds, and I'll go, brake! Okay. I just want you to know how to stop this car. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Now, when your relationship is going off track, you need to know how to brake. You need to know how to stop and repair. Do you remember I said last time, a couple of weeks ago, some couples, it was as simple as one of them flashing a grin. Sometimes it's one of them saying, hey, sorry. Maybe it's a little smile or a wink. They just know, hey, this thing's getting off track, and let's just take a break. We've got to repair this. This isn't going well. So this is a way to solve solvable problems. Learn to make and receive repair plans. Now, do you notice it says make and receive? That means you got to be able to receive the smile or the wink. Like, don't wink at me. What are you smiling for? You got to be able to make them and receive them. Number 3, another way, soothe yourself and each other. Soothe yourself and each other. I told you that, conflicts can often lead to something called flooding. That's what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. That's feeling overwhelmed. Once again, the man typically feels this quicker than the woman will feel it. They will feel overwhelmed. They'll feel flooded, heart rate, blood pressure, all those things that make it very difficult to process information or want to resolve anything. That's when you step back, you soothe yourself and each other. Difficult to do. It's better to do than to continue down the road where it's off track. By the way, the book provides some exercises on how to do this. Number 4, compromise. Compromise. Underneath that, I put this, which is the key to compromise, accepting influence. If you're not accepting influence, you're not going to compromise. So compromise. By the way, listen to this. Listen to this. Are you ready? This is the only way to resolve conflict. This is it. There's no other way to resolve conflict. You can ignore conflict. This is the only way to resolve it. Compromise. Pastor Fred, I kind of like getting my own way. You probably shouldn't be married. Compromise. We all know this, but it's very, very difficult. By the way, when your spouse is talking to you and you're doing something like this, that's not a spirit of compromise. As they begin to talk, you do something like this. Nope, 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 nope. Not really a posture of compromise. You're already communicating, I am not willing to compromise. Not going to go well for you. Not going to go well. Number 5, be tolerant of each other's faults. Another way to put that is this. Stay away from the trap of the if-onlys. The if-onlys. If only my spouse were taller, thinner, richer, smarter, neater, sexier, funnier, nicer, a better listener, faster, slower. All of my problems would vanish if only. By the way, I want you to hear this very carefully. If this is your attitude, you will not compromise. Instead, you will be on a campaign to change your spouse. And if you are on a campaign to change your spouse, would you please stop by and let Pastor Fred know how that's working out for you? Because I'd really like to know. How's that working out for you? Be tolerant of each other's faults. So number 5, solve solvable problems. Number 6 in these principles, number 6 is to overcome gridlock. Let's overcome gridlock. This one's difficult to do, and we're kind of running low on time, so I really encourage you to get the book. Overcoming gridlock is this. It's discovering the underlying issues, the one in the illustration that I gave you that was trust and rejection. You have to find a way to attempt, at least, here's how Dr. Gottman says it, become a dream detective. You say, why does he call it become a dream detective? Because individuals, when there's an underlying issue, he refers to this as a dream. You have a dream that things are going to work a particular way. When it doesn't work that way, oftentimes it's triggered some underlying issue. You need to become a dream detective with each other, find out what is underlying this issue, and incorporate the dreams into the marriage. For instance, did you know that couples have different ideas about how many to even have children or how many children they should have? A guy or girl may say, I just want to have one or two. And the other one wants, I want a great big family, because there's a dream. And there's usually something underneath the reason why they want a great big family. Maybe they grew up alone. Maybe there's reasons. And so we discover them. Did you know that couples disagree about like whether they're going to be social or not? Are they going to go out on Friday nights, or are we just staying home? All you ever want to do is sit in a chair. Well, all you ever want to do is go out and party. Well, there may be reasons of these things. Hospitable, you're going to have people in your home or not? I don't want anybody in my home. Lock the doors, pull the drapes. Oh, no, I want everybody to come on. Open the door. Neighbors, come on in. By the way, did you know people have issues about church? Did you know people come together and it's like, hey, men, now we're married. We're going to go to church every Sunday. No, we're not. Once a month. Or I'm an Easter, Christmas kind of guy. Here's another one. Well, we'll go to church, but do we serve? Oh, here's the one that I'm asked often. I'm just being honest. I'm asked often. Typically, women ask me more than men, 9 times out of 10. Pastor Fred, I would like to give and support the ministry of Eastside, and my husband doesn't want to. What should I do? As a good preacher, I go, give anyway. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Oh, yeah, these kind of things create problems because they're not even being discussed. And usually there's a reason why, when there's this gridlock over these issues, oftentimes there's an underlying issue. If not, then there's a way to compromise. Find and discover those issues. By the way, you will never discover the underlying issue in a place that's not safe. Last one, number 7. Write down, number 7. Create shared meaning. I've read this in many, many different books. It's the idea of creating your own culture, your own customs, your own rituals, your own stories. Here's what I mean. Rituals like, by the way, both husband and wife come in with rituals about ideas or backgrounds about holidays, about TV, about bedtime, about dinner, about how to spend the weekend, about hospitality, about church, about birthdays, anniversaries. How do we celebrate birthdays and anniversaries? Somebody may come from a background where, hey, we do nothing. Somebody else might be a huge party. Actually can cause problems. By the way, did you know how you treat each other when you're sick? I mean, it may be that you come from a culture that when somebody got sick in your family, the whole family chipped in and just took care of you, made sure everything's up. Other families lock them in the door with a bucket and go, see you when you're better. And that creates issues. Those are rituals. Roles. What's the role of a husband? What's the role of a wife? You're both going to have different ideas. What's the role of a father? What's the role of a mother? You're going to have different ideas. What's the role in work? Church, again. Certain values regarding family, affection, sex, money, education. How about discipline and parenting? You know, a lot of couples have children. You know what's going to happen when you have a baby? Listen to this. This is going to shock you. I'm going to help with a lot of couples right now. When you have a baby, they grow up. It's like, look at this cute little baby. That little thing's going to be running around terrorizing you in a couple of years. And all of a sudden, that little cute little baby who's terrorizing your home, you're going to be trying to figure out how to discipline them. And one of you is like, we better do this. And the other one is like, oh, no. Just love them. They've got to discover themselves. All right. Did you see my eye roll of cynicism right there? All right. So, couples don't even talk about it, and they're fighting about it. This stuff creates fights, recreation, possessions. All of these things form the basis of what's called shared meaning. And listen carefully, when couples have a shared sense of meaning, conflict is much less intense. When you've created your own culture and your ideas about things are similar, the closer you get, the less conflict you're going to have. By the way, this culture of shared meaning will not happen in an unsafe environment. That's why the other principles are so important to get into place. Then that creates a safe environment for this to happen. Now, I'm done. And we got it all in before it's time to get out. Well, I'm not quite done, so don't hang on. Because I want to give you a takeaway. And this takeaway, write this down, because this is the key. All three of them together. The key to resolving conflict, building a stable marriage, it's friendship. It's that being emotionally engaged. It's that enhancing your love map. It's doing all of those things. That's what it is. Now, before I let you go, somebody in here right now feeling overwhelmed, saying, you know what, you gave me a ton of information, all of this about making marriage work. How do we do it? And Pastor Fred, I just don't feel like there's any way I can get this done. I want to share a verse with you. Because I'm going to tell you something. Those of us who are followers of Jesus Christ, we have got a hidden power and strength that we need to put into play in our marriages. Philippians chapter 4, verse 19. I want you to read it out loud with me. Let's read it. And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. And by the way, you are united with Christ Jesus. That means you have direct access to the riches of his glory at any time. You need to bring this to bear on your marriage and your relationships. Pastor Fred, I'm not sure I can do this. You can as you rely on him, not your own self. This book is not about you going out and trying harder. Here's some information that you say, now, Lord, help me live this out. You live this out through me as you and I are connected. How many can do that? How many can say, and then pray about it and say, and by the way, listen to this. As you pray about this stuff, say, Lord, thank you that I'm going to be able to do this. Don't go, dear God, please help me because I can't do this. No, I'll just say, you know what? Lord, according to your strength, according to your riches and glory, thank you that we're going to be able to do this. You can do it.